Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to another installment of viewer submitted invasions. The first clip I have for you, actually set of clips, comes courtesy from a player by the name of G1370. If you don't know who this player is, I strongly advise you go check them out. They've got an awesome YouTube channel. I first met this player when I got invaded by him at the Grand Archives, and I saw him come up to me with a partisan and some sort of great axe, and I thought, either this is going to be some sort of weird meme build and I'm going to crush this guy, or he's going to obliterate me. And unfortunately for me, it ended up being the latter. I think I was invading, he invaded me. I tried to get some run back. I fired up the dried fingers. I got him again. He beat me a second time. He's a really good player, as you're going to see. These are meta invasions. You can see his build. It's a straight up quality build. The only thing I really noticed, not a lot of endurance, especially for his play style, but I'm not really sure where I'd make build sacrifices. Maybe I'd lower dexterity. I'm not really sure. I'd kind of be curious to hear what G1370 has to say about that. Really great strategy. The partisan, the mix-up value, he gets a ton of value out of it. The roll catching, as you'll see, it's really fierce, and I know from playing against him, you really have to watch your rolls, but the thing he was really good at doing against me, he was able to read my intent. He was able to differentiate my feints from my real attacks, and I ended up trading into his great axe all too much, and I ended up paying the price. But you'll see here how he deals with the gankers. I would say in the case of this player, there's really not a lot of advice for me to give per se. I think he does just about everything about as well as you can. But I like to showcase these kinds of players from time to time, just to show everyone kind of, what's possible. How do really good players approach the game? And in his case specifically, how do you use a build like this? It's a really creative and innovative build. It has the added advantage of most players haven't seen anything like this, so they're not going to know how to react to you. And I saw there he used an Undead Hunter charm kind of at the beginning of combat, which I thought was an interesting choice. I typically don't do that, but it can definitely add pressure and be an effective strategy. I think really the only problem with this sort of build is you obviously have to be very mindful of your co-invaders and make sure you don't hit them. Does, I think, a pretty good job here at dealing with Perseverance guy. The problem is that Great Axe attack speed is so slow that if your opponent happens to pop Perseverance right as you start the swing, you can't safely escape. My preferred way of dealing with players like this usually is to just run at them and backstab them, because they will tend to very predictably Perseverance right in your face as you run up. I like the escape there, obviously looking above rather than panic rolling. That's a better approach if you can do it. I also like the way he switches up his weapons a lot, so he's constantly trying to tailor his weapon setup for the situation. Nice waggle there to try to force the roll. That was a good decision there too, to go for the R1 rather than the backstab. He almost certainly would have whiffed the backstab. A look over his shoulder to see who it was that just died. And this host has got a big problem. Now watch this. Oh, that R2. Charged R2 into the L1. Almost got the panic roll catch there. Switches over to the hand axe. I really like that approach. So when you've got an opponent that's close to death, you can put them away without having to worry about slower weapons that are more easily reaction rollable, especially when the host is in pure defense mode, as that host certainly was right there. Nice job. Okay, so I think this clip actually does a better job of showing the kind of pseudo combo potential of this setup. And I noticed here, G1370, you switched to two-handed mode as you were coming up here on the Great Axe, and I assume that's in case you get into the corridor. Obviously having all the extra hyper armor and the weapon art's beneficial. And there, that was a R1 into weapon art, which is a kind of pseudo combo I've been seeing more frequently. It actually seems to be pretty effective at getting people to panic roll into the weapon art, which obviously does just a shit ton of damage. We back up down the road a little bit here, and actually this is kind of a problem here, because we've got two melee players. Nobody wants to engage, and then we've got a mage in the background, and you're going to see the mage actually hit G1370 here in a moment, and just watch how much damage he takes from a single cast. And I don't know the mirror, or rather the spells well enough to know specifically which spell this is, like Great Soul Arrow, maybe something like that. But I think a lot of the wisdom in these situations consists of knowing where to kind of try to stand your ground and have a fight, and when to go down the road. And oh my God, that damage is just crazy. I mean, that was like 30 to 40% of his health. So here I think he makes the right decision, swaps the cat ring, drops away, panic rolls a bit because he doesn't have eyes on them above. Tries to set up an ambush here, or at least thought about it. I like the R1 into jumping attack. Now, I really like your mix-ups and your creative use of combos. It makes you really difficult to predict. Nice roll catch there. Thank God for Tears of Denial, because you went to roll Crystal Skill Spear and ended up getting roll caught by the Ultra Greatsword. Watch what happens here. This is awesome. So he hits him with the L1 waggles to get him to start rolling, and I assume makes it harder to reaction parry the one-handed Greatsword. Oh man, nice roll catch, nice roll catch, nice punish. That was awesome. And I'm assuming the one-handed, the L1 and the Great Axe combos into the Charged R2 of the Partisan, which is just really, really nasty. But if you like watching combos like that, I definitely recommend check out G1370's channel, and you'll see another Wombo combo right here. Wow, really nicely done. Definitely recommend checking out his channel. He's got tons and tons of content like this. It's really amazing. GG. Okay, so next up is, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, LupineOssuary. This is like a Spear of the Church style build, and actually Lupine sent me some spear clips, which regrettably I wasn't able to include, but I've got some invasions. I think it's a pretty good build. The one thing, you use Vow of Silence, and I think we all know it has value, but it takes up 2 slots. It doesn't last very long. But I think you could make it more effective with one of the lingering rings. Unfortunately, your ring slots are all taken up. I know you're using Havel's ring, but I also notice you carry some things with you, like a shield, all the time. I would think about hard swapping. Maybe you could get to the point where you don't need Havel's ring, but I also know you're using an Ultra Greatsword, so trying to get low enough weight so that you don't need that particular ring is going to be really difficult, but I think it definitely hurts your build a little bit. Another thing is, on the build here, you show using Filionor's Chime, though I don't see you actually using Filionor's Chime, and I'm not sure why. You're not using buffs at all, and for heals, I think you're going to get plenty of heal out of the Filionor Chime. You might not get as much as you would with other chimes, but I think you also get the weapon art regen, which is hugely valuable. But if you didn't want the weapon art regen, you might think about using like the Saint Tree Bellvine, which is going to give you faster cast speeds. I don't know that your choice of Chime or Talisman is necessarily wrong. I'm not an expert on casting, so there may be a good reason to use the one that you're using. But we'll see here. I think that you would definitely benefit from having a freed up ring slot, though I do have to say, I really do enjoy watching people use Vow of Silence, and I think especially as a spear, Vow of Silence can have a lot of value, tons of value actually. It's so short that I almost feel like you have to have one of those lingering rings to make the time that it lasts long enough to be worth using. And something I've always noticed, phantoms that use poise weapons, I think they're so used to just winning every trade that it never occurs to them that they themselves might actually get out traded. I mean, you can see he's just coming in with abandon, assuming he's always going to win the trade, but obviously he's not, and he doesn't really seem to make the right adjustment. And something else that I noticed is when you've got a blessed weapon, which is obviously you're getting regen from it, but when you're just in combat, you'd probably benefit from switching out the talisman or chime to something offhand, either like a blessed cestus or like an S-stock or a hand axe, something where at a moment's notice you can go from one-handed to two-handed, and you can finish people off and you can pressure them. Because the setup like this, it's really great when you can blast like both phantoms and do tons of damage, but then when you get one of them at really low health, it can be really tough to finish them off. And just having that option there where just at the click of the triangle you can immediately go into full punish mode, like right here. You've got this guy pinned back here. He's starting to panic. He can't get out. He's smart enough to attack. He knows he's not going to be able to roll his way out. But if at that point you had been able to switch to like a hand axe, you could have probably won the fight right there and just put him under a tremendous amount of pressure. And I just think it works so well on all builds, and having that as kind of like a go-to option. They don't weigh a whole lot. You can go rapier, cestus, S-stock, whatever. I just think that's great. I think the switch here to a straight sword is a really smart idea. Sword and board. Just think about whether you need the shield on you all the time. I think in your email to me you indicated that you're not good at swapping. I'm not either, but that's how you get better. Host goes for a totally transparent parry attempt. You could have punished that with a backstab if you had run back there instead of walking, but nice read to pick up on his parry attempt. I also like the setup parry. A lot of people don't expect that with medium shields. Nicely done. GG. Okay, so next up we've got SHLeal. SHLeal comes to us with a soul level 90 dex build. I think the stat allocation makes sense to me. I can't really comment too much on some of the specifics, like the 30 endurance. I don't know if that's a good amount or not. It seems a little bit high, especially for your setup. I don't know. I know Dex is kind of funny in the sense that you get large returns for each level, and then the returns start to diminish quite a bit, and then they pick up again as you go further and further and level it further. I don't know where you are on sort of that sine curve. The build in terms of like the weapons, I mean, Lothric Knight straight sword, iron round shield, light crossbow, and dagger. I mean, that is about as strong a setup as you can come up with. I'm a huge fan of that kind of setup, though I don't use the crossbow as much as I should. This host here is kind of interesting. First of all, a solo host in Ring City is pretty unusual to begin with. Using Smo's hammer is pretty unusual. Now he's blocking presumably because he sees the crossbow, and he goes for what I consider to be like a classic ultra bait. The R2 into R1. See people do that a lot, like with Great Club, sometimes, although less often, with like an ultra great sword. But you were paying attention, you learned from your mistake. He tried to do it again. That's like that old iron rule of hosts. They'll always do things that work again. And there the host was really smart. He knew you were going to try to punish his Estus with the crossbow, so he waited to heal, he blocked, rolled the crossbow bolt, and then healed. Here I think you get caught off guard by the fact that he swings 4 times, but I like the fact that you attacked out his stun knowing he probably blew all of his stamina. Incidentally, just a couple things that I'm noticing. First of all, if you roll like that unlocked, you can get a lot more roll backstabs. That's actually a great way to start fishing, kind of dip your toes in the water, so to speak. The other thing I noticed is you seem to be using the crossbow exclusively locked on, and it's still a great tool when you use it locked on. Just like right there, it can be a great punish for whiffs, a great whiff punish tool at range. But I think the power of the crossbow really starts to shine when you start to use it unlocked. And I don't know if you've ever fought a really, really good unlocked crossbow player. Grim is obviously probably the master of the unlocked crossbow, but players like QY are also extremely skilled, and they can bring a ton of pressure to bear in a fight with great unlocked crossbow skills. You can punish rolls on reaction, at least at reasonable latency. I think the latency here isn't that great, and it kind of picks up a little bit. You're having trouble punishing his rolls, and now here comes the blue. In situations like this, I often wonder if the host actually had Way of Blue equipped to begin with, or whether they decided to equip it when they felt like they were getting outplayed. And like right there would have been another awesome opportunity for a backstab, a roll backstab. After the running attack, he was almost certain to go for the standing R1. You could have rolled early and been in an awesome position for a backstab. Just little things like that if you want to start fishing, things to keep in mind. Obviously, bad trade into the running attack. And when you fight players like this, you kind of have to make a decision about what you're going to do, because you can play completely reactive and only whiff punish. And that's quite honestly how I used to play, but it's boring, it's kind of lame. And so now I try to bring more aggression to a fight like that, and I consider it sort of a personal challenge to see how much aggression can I bring against a weapon that's clearly going to outtrade me. And I think you're doing a really good job of that too. but it gets really scary with latency like this. It's essentially a massive buff to the hyper armor weapon. And the host is being reasonably cautious. He's not letting you easily outspace him over and over. The R2, incidentally, is another great thing that you can roll backstab. It's got a decent bit of recovery. And given the lengthy animation, you can actually roll pretty early and get to his back right as he's finishing up the attack. So just something else to consider if you ever think about fishing. So I personally actually tend to lose a lot of invasions in spots like this where there's a blue that comes in and the blue doesn't show up right away. Nice backstab there. But when the blue doesn't show up right away, I'm not paying enough attention to where he might be. And there was the unlocked crossbow. That was really nice. I would just advise trying to do that a little bit more often. The other thing you might do is more running attacks, especially like after you hit him when he blocks. You know he's not going to want to block the next attack. He's going to roll. He's been really consistent. So if you start the running attack as soon as you see that, you can catch his panic roll, especially if you're able to buffer it. Now you can't buffer it because you got an offhand crossbow, but that's just another way that you can keep up really good pressure in those situations. And it's actually a big change that I've made to my game, just even in the last 3 months or so, and I've seen huge returns from it. Here comes the blue. And that buckler would scare me. That was a nice whiff punish. Nice read. Such a blatant parry attempt. Really nice to see you punish that. Nice crossbow unlocked wake up punish. That was beautiful. That was a textbook finish of that blue. And there you anticipated the R1 after the running R1. And as a consequence, you were able to position yourself for an awesome whiff punish and able to win the invasion. Very nice fight, very nicely done. Okay, so for the final clip today, this one comes courtesy of Weyland. Weyland's actually a friend of mine from way back in the day, back when Saint first started streaming. We did a lot of co-invasions together. He's got a Spear of the Church build here, which I think is pretty hip, obviously. I would say it is a relatively standard sort of spear build. 40 Faith seems to kind of be the meta for spears these days. It is a meta build in the sense it's a soul level 132, so he has a lot more options in terms of stat allocation, but no complaints about it. The one thing that's really interesting to me, Bountiful Light and Great Heal, obviously I'm a big fan. Projected Heal, I've actually come around on this miracle a bit for spears. I used to not use it, but what I found is it has a lot of utility when you're up against somebody who's going to use Perseverance to chase you into the spear fragment, and it's one of the only ways that you can safely heal. Now, in this case, Weyland actually chooses to use it a bit differently and in a way that actually would not have occurred to me, but I think is really smart. He uses Projected Heal to actually heal the Guardian, and I think that is a tremendous strategy to use. And he also uses an Ultra Greatsword. It's blessed, and this is not a strategy that I usually employ. I tend to get frustrated by Ultra Greatswords, but I think actually Weyland uses it to great effect here. And of course, he's also got the offhand S-Stock, so he's got the up-close punish tool, and when he gets somebody at low health, he's able to put them away. Now, the one thing I might say about your play, Weyland, is I think there's some circumstances where you had opportunities to put Phantoms away, and I think you would have been better off pursuing them in some cases, although it's hard to argue with the eventual outcome here, and that's as much a personal preference as it is anything else. The other thing I want to note here is the squad ends up using Soothing Sunlight, and I want to draw your attention to something that comes up here in just a moment. But you're doing a good job of staying topped off. You got tons of regen going for you. They barely made a dent in your health, so you've been obviously doing a great job so far. But the squad is also doing a bad job. They're not pressuring you in mass like they really should be to take advantage of their numbers and try to break your poise and try to be able to put you away. I think I saw maybe a pivot attempt there. Okay, so now see this host, or this Phantom rather. He just used Soothing Sunlight. You hit him twice. He's at low health. He has not healed yet. And notice he used Blue Estus, so you know he's waiting to go and throw off another Soothing Sunlight. So at that point, I would have been on his ass, pressuring him, and maybe he has an Estus or two, maybe he doesn't, but at the very least, you can force him to use what remaining Estus he has, and then he'll be easier to pick off. But now, because he cast Soothing Sunlight, he healed up the whole team, and he's still able to hold on to whatever Estus he has. So just a tip, I would try to focus in on squad mates like that are using Healing Miracles, because they very often won't have very much in the way of healing Estus. And as I was watching this clip, I was thinking to myself, man, I would have put on Night Slayer, and right about the time I thought it, you did it, which was kind of funny. One other thing to note is that the S-Stock doesn't do nearly as much stamina damage as something like the Hand Axe or even a Cestus, or I guess the Demon Fist. I guess Gabri said that it does a ton of stamina damage, so something to consider in these situations. If you're going to switch to Night Slayer, maybe think about switching to like Hand Axe or Cestus to do even more stamina damage and break somebody's guard. But these guys are just content to come in here and trade with your Ultra Greatsword and your enormous amount of poise, which is kind of inexplicable to me. But yeah, these guys are just getting absolutely brutalized. And I love the strategy of keeping the Guardian alive. He's at a minimum, he's a great distraction. So that's a really cool strategy, and it's probably one that I'm going to have to try and incorporate and see how that works out for me. So at this point, with half the squad gone, the healer's gone, this squad is in big trouble. And this is a lesson here why you don't really have to worry too much about critical attacks, backstabs, and parries, because they just do so little damage. I like the fact that you just kind of ignored it, and you're just coming in here and just spamming your straight sword. There's just nothing this squad can do. Really nice fight. Thanks everybody who sent in submissions. Take care now.